In 2007, the FPS landscape looked quite a bit different. The most popular games seemed to follow the formula of arena shooters like Halo or World War shooters like Medal of Honor. The Call of Duty franchise itself at this time had been around for just a few years, and had played it safe with solid World War II games, all of which found relative success. But none of them really stood out in the busy shooter market. Infinity Ward were well known at this time for releasing Call of Duty, and probably the best game up until this point, Call of Duty 2. But now it was time for Call of Duty 4, and this is where everything would change, forever. The course of gaming history was about to be redirected, and the franchise was about to be defined for a generation. This was modern warfare. How do you go from World War II with MP40s, old school tanks and flamethrowers, to contemporary warfare with over half a century's worth of tactical and technological advancement? Well, that was the first hurdle for Call of Duty to overcome in this new direction. To say this game was a risk is certainly an understatement. We start as Soap McTavish, accompanied by Captain Price and Gaz, but you already know that by now. This is 2011, not the 1940s, and as world tensions begin to rise again, we're tasked with taking out the ultra-nationalist Russian forces led by one Imran Zakhaev and another man who has come to power in the east, al-Assad. This revolves around their increasing power and likelihood of nuclear warfare, which would certainly spell bad times for the West. Taking it back to the real world, and this game released in the midst of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. So to answer how we got from World War II to modern warfare, it's clear that Infinity Ward took clear inspiration from the wars happening during the development of this game. Back to the game though, and as we fight through some of my favourite missions in the original Modern Warfare trilogy, like Blackout and Charlie Don't Surf, the story splits into both the perspective of Soap, joined by the SAS, as they track down Zakhaev in and around Russia, and Paul Jackson alongside the Marines, who track down al-Assad in the Middle East. This constant switching of perspective gives us a scale of the ongoing war, but from a gameplay perspective, it gives us a mix of more stealthy tactical missions with Soap and Price, and more traditional action missions with the Marines. We continue to chase down the bad guys, but in retaliation, this happens.
Everyone hang on!
One of the most powerful scenes in gaming history. Things have gone nuclear, and the world is at war once again. Midway through the game, and we have the most iconic mission in this game, and perhaps of all time, all gillied up. Its placement in the middle of the game is perfect in order to give character development for both Price and Zakhaev, as we find out much more about their backstory. The idea of stealthily moving through the exclusion zone in Chernobyl is riveting, and it brings forth the real-world grounded feel this game was going for. As for the gameplay, and this mission takes its time, as you stealthily move through the grass and progress towards your sniper position. And what makes it so perfect is that it was one of the only missions to allow the player to do the whole mission in stealth. It ends with us sniping Zakhaev, but as we know, he is still out there. One man who isn't is al-Assad, who's been taken out by the Marines, but this has only seemed to increase the threat posed by Zakhaev. As we approach the final act, the story focuses its lens on Soap, Price, and the mission to stop nuclear warfare. We track down Victor Zakhaev, but he doesn't give us anything, instead doing this. This spells endgame once Imran finds out, and prepares us for the final 4 missions, the most intense section of the game, fighting through what seems to be like an infinite number of enemies until we finally reach the control room, and World War III is prevented. But Zakhaev is still out there. Or is he? And boom! Just like that, the game ends. A feeling of hope and uncertainty looms over us. But as the end credits roll, one thing is for sure. The Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare campaign has opened your eyes to contemporary warfare and is superb from start to finish. Before we get into the multiplayer, guys, I just wanted to say that if you missed the trailer, this is the start of something special we're building over this summer. Today we're looking at COD4, but within just a few months, I will have retrospectively looked back on every single COD game. So if you, yes you, want to stay up to date with this series, make sure to subscribe and turn that damn bell on, because in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be looking into Call of Duty World at War, and I'm telling you, you don't want to miss out. But now, let's get into the multiplayer. This is where it all began. There were COD multiplayers before this, but everything that we would come to know about what a Call of Duty multiplayer is would be put forth in Modern Warfare. Classic class selection with a strong list of weapons, attachments, equipment, and a variety of perks and 3 perk slots to choose from. That was introduced in Modern Warfare. A prestige mode with 10 prestiges, all with their own unique prestige icon, rewards, and grind to reach. That was introduced in Modern Warfare. Kill streaks, such as a UAV, airstrike and helicopter. That was again introduced in Modern Warfare. Map design as we know it. That was, well, you get the idea by now, introduced in Modern Warfare. The list of things this game revolutionised, for not just this franchise, but the majority of FPS games in the next 17 years is untold. Even Call of Duty's closest rivals began to take inspiration from the success of some of the things that this game introduced. It's a tale as old as time that Modern Warfare was revolutionary, and everyone knows this by now. But it was even the little things, like being able to use modern guns and equipment in a modern setting that hadn't been done to this level before. But taking away all the history and importance of this game, what is Call of Duty 4 really like? Well, to put it simply, it's pure excellence. The class selection is at its most primitive here. Still a good selection of guns, but the attachments are certainly limited in retrospect. A weapon will tend to have a few attachments, but none that will make as big of a splash as in later games. The perks on the other hand are plentiful, with 7 in the first 2 slots and 8 in the last. They all have their different roles, and they really bring out that careful crafting of a class that we all love to get lost in. But that being said, that would be ignoring one big key thing here. Yes, all these perks have their own role, but slot 2, oh slot 2, it contains 2 perks, and I'm sure you know them. They are so powerful that they dictate every single combat scenario in this game. Say them with me now: Stopping Power and Juggernaut. The former increases your damage, whereas the latter increases your health.
What?
It becomes clear very quickly that if you want to do well, having Stopping Power is very useful in taking out players with Jug, and having Jug is very useful in stopping players with Stopping Power. This is a real shame, as the other perks in slot 2 should, and in theory are, very powerful, and it should create a real dilemma in which you choose. For example, Sleight of Hand has faster reload speed, or Double Tap has increased rate of fire. But in a game where fast time to kill is so prevalent, Stopping Power and Jug become necessary, and still to this day they reign supreme on the battlefield. And that isn't the only overpowered thing in COD4, as again, still to this day, this game is home to one of, if not the most overpowered gun. Drumroll please, the M16. If you haven't played this game, you might be surprised that this gun, that appears in pretty much every modern Call of Duty game, was so powerful all the way back in COD4. But let me explain. This gun already had incredible damage, but combine that with the previously mentioned Stopping Power, and you have a rifle that can eliminate anyone across the map with a simple burst. Is it a shame that COD4 is quite unbalanced? Well, if you're looking to play seriously, then yes, it can be annoying, and I'm sure back in the game's heyday it was very annoying. But now, things like this are a relic of a foregone time. A time where a game wasn't patched every week, and these overpowered mechanics could be played in 2007, or they can be played in 2024. And they're the exact same, and there is something quite special about that. The gameplay loop in Call of Duty 4's multiplayer is a perfect blend of tactics and reaction times, which does help give it that gritty feeling it was going for in 2007. What about the map design though? To me, map design is the most important pillar of a good Call of Duty game, and has to work well with the mechanics. Whilst this game does have some duds, I'm looking at you Block and Wetwork, it has one of the most well-rounded selection of maps in the series that perfectly complements the gameplay. Smaller urban maps like Crash, Backlot and Vacant have all had remakes and are the perfect size for all types of gameplay to benefit. Maps like Countdown and Overgrown might not be everyone's go-to, but they provide brilliant long-range sniper gameplay and they flow well for that kind of style. There's underrated gems and personal favourites of mine like Pipeline and Crossfire, which are always a blast to play. Pipeline in particular is such an incredible map to me, and it really goes underappreciated when we're in the conversation of the best maps. And then how could we forget the birthplace of 1v1s, Shipment. A map that I'm sure we're all fed up of seeing now, but this version of Shipment was as close to perfection as you're going to get with a map like this. It certainly wasn't perfect. Grenade spam was pretty frustrating, but it had a flow to it that the newer versions just don't have. It may have been experimental at the time, and miles different to every other map in the game, but it shows that the developers took care in their map design, and would at least try and make it work. There's a reason we've seen it so many times since. A lot of the maps tried different power positions to fight for, but no matter what, there was always vulnerabilities in every position. The map layouts were not always your formulaic 3-lane maps, which gave this game a memorable selection with lots of differing gameplay. A third mode has become a staple of the Call of Duty franchise since COD4, and whilst it's a shame this game didn't have one, it's not to say that it didn't come with a few extras to mess around with. The campaign contained an obstacle course in the training mission. A simple premise of shooting targets and running through as fast as you can. Players could try and improve on their time, beat Infinity Ward's best time, or battle against their friends to see who could be the best FNG. Another tough test came at the end of the game through the iconic level Mile High Club. One of the shortest but most challenging missions in Call of Duty history sees you fight for a damaged plane. The intense close quarters combat leaves no room for error, making this an extreme challenge on the higher difficulties, but one that players love to brag about in 2007. And the final unique charm this game had, that surprisingly hasn't returned in newer games, is cheats. No, I'm not talking about the hackeroonies, but instead fun additions to the campaign if you collect all the intel. They had that extra replayability and fun factor, and the overall cherry on top of a quite magnificent game. The impact of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is so vast that as we look around at the first-person shooter landscape in 2024, it's hard not to find a game influenced by Infinity Ward's creation. Obviously, Call of Duty still holds on to many of the things introduced, even if some have been lost. Battle Royale games like Apex Legends were made by some of those who worked on COD4, and the newly releasing X-Defiant aims to introduce many of the things popularised by Modern Warfare that have been taken away in recent FPS games. This game led to a trilogy as well, which we'll get onto later on in this series. It was the only game in the franchise to be remastered fully, and as of late, the series was rebooted in an attempt to replicate the popularity that it originally saw. It's hard to imagine a world without COD 4, with its stellar campaign and groundbreaking multiplayer, and it's for these reasons why I give it an 83 out of 100 score. It's a game that doesn't lack in any area, and whilst nowadays it might be weird to not have a third mode, it still contains a better campaign than most, with fan favourite characters, a multiplayer with a ton of content and creative map design, and finally, a charm that could only be found in a game developed with as much passion as Infinity Ward showed, and a game with a foregone time when gaming was in its prime. But I've been Ranger, and this has been how Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare changed the game.